Somebody called us and told us that you were real sick. Do you think anybody would try to hurt you?
I just don't know.
Do you remember when your dad died?
Yeah.
And your brother, he died too?
Yeah.
How sick had they been? I'm talking about right before they died.
They were very sick.
Who found Sean?
I did. He coughed up blood.
Why didn't you call an ambulance or call 911?
Because I was busy on my laptop.
You were busy on your laptop?
Well, that's all I could say.
Every suspect accused of a crime has the right to remain silent. Many agree to be interrogated anyway, but they can stop the interview at any moment, making it a race against time. Justice hangs in the balance.
On June 11th of 2013, the front desk received an anonymous tip from an individual saying they were suspicious of a couple death-related incidents and an incident where a young woman was hospitalized and was also feared that she was going to pass away. This caller gave the name of the Stouty family. He was suspicious that the mother of the home, Diane Stouty, could have been involved in the deaths of her husband, her son, and now the grave illness of her daughter. The doctor I spoke with said they had performed numerous tests on Sarah and they all came back as negatives. Her condition was very dire, that it was expected that Sarah was not going to survive. However, the subjects involved in her care all gave me the same story, that they were suspicious of Diane. They said Diane laughed and joked with people and was not acting how they thought a normal mother would act. And the doctor said, kind of based on the unknown nature of Sarah's illness, he was suspicious that it could possibly be a poisoning case. I began to do some internet searches on the family, looking at social media accounts, just whatever was out there. I found out the Stouty family consisted of Diane, the mother. She was very active in church, and she also had been a nurse for a long time. Mark was a stay-at-home father, and they had 4 children. They had Sean, who was the oldest, Rachel, and then Sarah, and then they had a younger daughter as well. I also learned that a year earlier, Mark Stouty passed away at the age of 61 of an apparent heart attack. And then it was not long after when his son Sean, who was only 26 years of age, passed away. The medical examiner's office determined Sean's cause of death was sudden death and epilepsy. The timing of the incidents was strange, with all of them being so close together, and then with Sarah and Sean both being so young. I really wanted to find out what was going on in the Stouty home.
When Mark and Diane got married, Mark invited me to be the best man at his wedding. Mark was 4.5 years older than I was, so Mark and I were fairly close. When he got into music, it really started taking over his mind and where his thought processes were going. The first time I heard him, I was blown away.
Dreaming of the lady who one day will come, oh, what is that I do?
Then he was actually doing live gigs around the Springfield area and was actually making some money, and he seemed to be happy with that. When Mark died, I was very sad. I'd lost a friend, someone to talk to music about. And then his boy, Sean, several months later, died. It was a lot.
Sean, by all accounts, was a good kid. He just was an autistic child that may have not have acted like what many would consider normal. But according to Sean's teachers, he was a very good student. Sean would read a textbook front to back, and his memory was so good that he could recite facts throughout the textbook.
Sean's death, it did seem kind of strange being so close to Mark's passing. I was given the impression it was just an accumulation of prior medical issues caught up with him, and that was it.
Diane told officers that her husband had been ill for several days, and that on the day of his passing, he had actually had several seizures. The officers questioned why she didn't take him to the hospital or call an ambulance, and her response was that Mark just refused to go, and so she allowed him to stay at the home.
When we examined Mark's body, there was some blood around his mouth. I asked the medics on scene what that may have been caused from, and was told that Mark was intubated and could have been from that. I had a problem with the fact that she didn't call EMS. I was told that Diane was a registered nurse, so a medical professional should probably know better and insist on Mark going to the hospital after he had had 3 seizures that day. It was a complicated situation, but there was no evidence that anything nefarious had occurred at the residence to contribute to his death.
Sean's death was just a few months after Mark's. Both had been described as having flu-like symptoms, being sick for a while leading up to the death, and then both were noted to have blood around their mouth at the time they were found. I had all these suspicions that were building and building. The problem, however, is that in all of the incidents, when you actually looked for the poisoning or what could be causing this, there was just nothing there. I brought up the possibility of poisoning, and the doctor told me that everything that had been tested was all negative. However, he said that it could be very difficult to determine if there was something in their system without exactly knowing what it was that they needed to look for. And he also informed me that if something were to come up, that Sean's tissue samples were still being held, and that there could be further in-depth analysis to try to discover if this could be a poisoning. It was troubling, one, because of Sarah's condition, but also because there was still 2 other children in the home. There was Rachel, and then I had a younger daughter as well. I felt that I needed to act, and so at this point, Diane became a focus of my investigation. Prior to bringing her into the interview room, she was just very calm, very stoic. But after putting her in the interview room, I noticed she almost immediately clamped up. She raised her legs and she put her hands together and acted almost as if she was praying, which I thought was very strange.
Is it stout?
Stouty.
Stouty? Okay. I appreciate you being willing to come down and speak with us. We're very helpful on your part.
I'm trying to be.
Yeah.
Don't know what I can tell you.
Well, okay. That's what we're going to try and get figured out. Obviously, like I told you at the house, we got the call about Sarah and her condition.
I decided to take a very gentle and soft tone, and I had to walk a very fine line in terms of, is this individual a victim or a suspect? Because I truly did not know at that point.
When did all this come about?
She started Saturday. She complained of a little headache, and her stomach was upset, and she threw up a couple of times, and that was it. So I didn't think any about it until Sunday afternoon, and then I couldn't get her to wake up. She didn't respond to me, so we took her to the emergency room.
Okay. So you brought her to the ER?
Yeah. We literally Rachel and I had to carry her.
Your 22-year-old Rachel?
Yeah.
Oh,
We
wow.
carried her to the car. And it's like, okay, this is not good. You know, it's like something's wrong.
At this time, it was full belief that Sarah was not going to survive. The doctors could not figure out what was going on. Her organs were shutting down, and Diane was just so calm, did not appear to be concerned whatsoever. It really was just another alarm bell.
And as far as you know, they still don't know anything at the hospital?
No. Other than whatever happened really did a number on her.
I was told by my nieces that Sarah was in the hospital, not doing very well, was in ICU, and I thought, what's going on? I had never really heard of any specific medical issues regarding Sarah, so it was a mystery to me.
And there's been no doctors or anybody at all that's been able to say they have any kind of a clue whatsoever. And
No.
I'm assuming they've been running all kinds of tests.
I think they've done every test under the sun. I mean, her tox screen was normal. Nothing. Not even an aspirin. And it's like, okay. I don't get it.
Diane never asked anything at all about why I'd want to speak with her about her sick daughter. I mean, the police department normally doesn't come and ask somebody to speak with them about an illness for a child. So for her to not have any questions from the very get-go, it was a point that raised some flags.
We had no clue. Still don't really have a clue. I mean, with her medical background, she's bipolar.
Okay.
My first thing is, did she get into something? You know, did she try to overdose or something? And then when I got home from the ER, I checked her medicine, and she had plenty of pills left, so I don't think she OD'd her medicine, but I have no clue.
Okay. Do you know what else she might have done?
Oh gosh, I don't know. I mean, as far as pills, I don't have much. Tylenol, Motrin.
Diane makes a real odd laugh at that point. A nervous laughter could be the characteristic of somebody that's trying to be deceitful or trying to mask some kind of emotion.
Anything else maybe besides pills or that she could do?
Well, if she got into like cleaners and stuff like that, but I don't know. I can't really picture her doing that.
What kind of cleaners do you think it could have been that she would have?
What do I have? I can't see her taking soap. Yuck. The general, everyday cleaner. I have some of that.
What would that be?
What's the name of it? Lysol?
Okay. What the cleaners, if that was the case, would
That
could
I would think even that something in there would show up.
how would that show up?
I don't know, whatever chemicals are in there. Because I know that it was negative on alcohol, so I know she didn't get into the beer.
In terms of working suicide incidents, I don't know that I've ever come across one where somebody's taken a cleaner, and definitely not soap. It seemed very disingenuous, and it just essentially cemented my suspicions that this could be a very bad situation in terms of her being involved.
Are you married?
I'm widowed.
When did your
My husband died last year of a heart attack.
Oh, really? How old was he?
61.
Oh, so he was young. Wow.
He had a lot of medical issues.
Did he?
So, yeah.
What kind of stuff did he have?
Oh, he had liver problems. He was diabetic. He wouldn't quit smoking. Yeah.
Do you have a son as well?
No, not anymore.
Not
He died. He had a seizure disorder.
When did he die?
That was last fall.
How old was he?
He was 26.
Okay.
He'd had several strokes.
Kind of an unexpected, or
It wasn't a complete surprise. We knew he'd been sick.
did they do any kind of autopsy on Mark?
No, they didn't.
No.
No. You know, he was pretty overweight, and they just said it's a heart attack for sure. And it's like, okay.
Where's he buried? Is
He
in
was
town?
cremated.
Oh, he was cremated. Okay.
Yeah.
Was Sean cremated, or he was cremated as well? Okay.
Yep.
Was that just kind of a family wish then? So if Sarah would have passed, she would have been
Probably,
she would have been
yeah.
cremated as well. Okay. All right.
One technique that I used a lot with Diane were awkward silences and awkward pauses. It was just to try to elicit any type of information from her. And it was extremely difficult because Diane just sat there and we just stared at each other.
Do you know much about the autopsy process?
A little bit.
Okay. What did they tell you about Sean's autopsy?
They had found where he'd had his initial stroke, and then there was evidence of seizures.
Okay. Because we've spoken with the medical examiner about that. And I guess when they first did it, they take tissue samples and hair samples and all kinds of other samples, and they
Yeah.
basically keep them for a while. And fortunately, they still have a bunch of his stuff, and so they're gonna do a bunch of tests on his stuff as well.
Okay.
Okay.
When I brought up to her the fact that Sean's tissue samples had been saved, she didn't need to say anything at that point because I could read it on her face that she was worried.
So if his stuff were to come back with anything suspicious, how would you explain that? They're going to go back, obviously, like I told you, and reevaluate Sean's autopsy and the samples that have been saved since then. And with Sarah, it sounds like they're doing a bunch of tests, and they're even sending some tests off to labs elsewhere. They mentioned the Mayo Clinic and,
Oh, wow.
and possibly other places, just the nature of this. Do you think there's going to be anything suspicious that they find in all these tests that they're going to be doing?
I have no clue.
I didn't know what to expect in terms of the test results, but I told her that because I wanted to see her response. I wanted to see her reaction to it, and it almost froze her. I was very worried. Is that going to be something where she goes, oh my gosh, I'm no longer speaking with this detective. Is she going to lawyer up? So I had to try to come up with something that would get her to speak more openly with me.
What about you and your husband, Mark? What was your guys' marriage like?
How can I say this? We were still married, but it was not what you call a good marriage.
Had there been infidelities on either side?
He had.
Yeah. So he wasn't the best husband?
Probably not.
Okay.
Not to society, no.
What do you mean by that? Not to society?
Well, he was running around, and he would drink and smoke pot, and
So he wasn't a very good guy, is what you're saying?
Yeah.
Did Mark work at all?
No.
No, he didn't work.
No.
So, what did he do then?
Played music.
Okay. So you were the breadwinner for the family. He didn't work, didn't bring no any money for you guys. And was there ever any physical abuse towards you?
No.
Nothing like that?
No.
Okay.
I was trying to almost portray her as the victim, that maybe Mark was doing things that he should not be doing, and I could sympathize with her. And so I had to continue to try to build her up and to continue with the victim narrative.
He's putting all this burden on you. You're playing the mother and father role. This is big stuff to deal with. I understand that. Sometimes in life, people just slip up a little bit, make a mistake. You would agree with that, right?
Mm-hmm.
So here we are with this situation now where some stuff's been brought to our attention. And I think you're a very good lady with the right intentions,
try.
right? You try.
I try.
But sometimes everybody kind of reaches a tipping point, and it gets to where again, like I said, that maybe certain decisions are made that normally wouldn't be made for that. And with some of the stuff involved in these cases, from what we've been looking at, I think you're aware of why we're here.
Maybe, I don't know.
I started down a theme of just her being pushed so far that she just couldn't take it anymore. I began to move closer to her just to give her the sense that I was there to try to help her and get her story out that she wanted everyone to know.
Let's talk about it, because I think you probably want to talk about it.
Sarah's a difficult child to deal with.
I understand.
And I've been kind of putting pressure on her to, you need to get out and get a job. Your college bills are coming due. I don't want to pay for them. After all, you get tired of doing everything for your kids, and it's like you need to step up and do it. As far as did I do something to her, I didn't do anything to her. I mean, I guess I could have taken her to the ER sooner, but I didn't.
When Diane told me that she could have taken Sarah to the ER sooner, I thought that she was getting ready to put it all out there. Diane knew how sick her daughter was, and she waited, and she's now admitting to me that she waited. It sounds cliche, but I was beginning to realize I was speaking with a truly evil person.
You're a good person. Good people just get to a point and make a mistake. Something that they normally wouldn't do. They've been pushed and pushed and pushed, and sometimes there's just no other way. And I think that's the case.
I may not be the best mother in the world, because I do wait a little longer before I take them to the doctor, but I didn't hurt my kids. And when Mark died, it was actually a relief. I just don't tell people that.
Well, Diane, again, you're in here for
Yeah.
a reason. You know that.
Mm-hmm. Well, is it bad if you argue with your kids and tell them, and I probably shouldn't have, it's like sometimes you'd be better off if you'd kill yourself. Because I regret that argument.
So tell me, Dan, let's get this out here.
Sarah's like, we had been arguing, and she got really mad at me. And I told her, for all the stuff that you've put me through, blah, 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 blah. And I think she went out in the much. And there's antifreeze out there. Because she was commenting, it's like, well, that kills cats. I was like, yeah, it also kills people.
It was a huge adrenaline rush to hear her mention antifreeze, because up to that point in the interview, there was nothing that made any sense about what could have happened to Sarah. The excitement that is going through me, it's kind of indescribable. However, I have to do my best to not let that show. I don't want her to see any kind of change in me that would shut her down.
I think you just got to a breaking point, Diane.
I'm a horrible mother.
I wouldn't say that. I think there's just a breaking point for everybody. We can only take so much. Now's your chance to tell us why and to show some remorse and ask for forgiveness. So tell me about it, Diane.
I know Sean and Sarah were very close. They talked a lot together, and I know Sean, he did talk about killing himself too. Put it really short and sweet. I knew they were drinking antifreeze. And I was so mad at them, I didn't want to take them in. I delayed.
And that would just eliminate those problems, wouldn't it? They wouldn't be there to nag you, to bug you, to talk bad to you, to be mean to you, to be disrespectful to you. That would just be a problem that's gone.
I guess you could say that.
How'd you know they were drinking antifreeze, Diane?
They told me.
But Diane, right now is not the time to tell me things that aren't true. Because you and I both know why you knew they were drinking antifreeze.
Because I saw them drinking it.
You knew, Diane, that they were drinking antifreeze because you were giving it to them.
And I didn't know what else to do. I really didn't.
My heart was pounding. She calmly said, I didn't know what else to do. And I wanted to get up and jump and scream and hug the other detectives that were involved with this, knowing that we were going to have some kind of resolution. But I cannot let her see that, because even though now is the confession, there's still a lot more information that I've got to get from Diane.
Well, tell me about it, Diane. That's why I'm here to listen. Tell me about it, Diane. Tell me everything that was going on.
Just a lot of arguments. Both Sean and Sarah would just basically trash the house. They would do whatever they wanted to do and never helped support or even contribute. I should have just killed myself.
How long had you been giving them the antifreeze before they finally got, before Sean passed and before Sarah got to the point that she was?
Maybe a couple of days.
And what were you putting it in?
Coca-Cola.
How much would you put in?
Just a little bit.
How much is a little bit?
A couple of teaspoons, maybe.
You're finally starting to do the right thing. You gotta be honest with me about everything. Who's the first person that you killed?
Mark.
Is there anybody else besides Mark, Sean, and Sarah?
No.
I mean, why did you decide that you were going to use antifreeze to do it?
It was easy.
Would you just make something to drink for them at night? Or how would that go?
In the morning.
For both Sean and Sarah?
Yeah.
And then that's when you put the antifreeze in the drain?
Even with Diane admitting that she had administered the antifreeze, there was still a lot of questions. I wanted to know how, when, how often, the dosages.
When did you start with Mark?
A couple of days before.
How many doses or how many days did it take?
For him. 3.
Why did you only give it to him for 3 days? And then while he's sick, why didn't you continue to give it to him?
I just didn't feel like it. I almost had changed my mind. Does that make sense?
If you had changed your mind at that point, why didn't you try to get him some help? Because you knew he was sick?
Because by then I hated his guts. I mean, I hated his guts.
And then Sean, how did stuff get started with Sean?
Sean would be interfering with whatever I would do to the point where he was getting into my work. And I would have to tell him, you need to leave, go to your room. How can I explain this? He was severely autistic. You get to the point where you just pull out your hair because I didn't know what else to do with him.
He was such an interference and a bother, you just said you can't take it anymore.
Well, he was more than a bother.
Now, with Sarah, why didn't you just leave her at home to die like the others?
I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it. Watching Sarah, it's like, I can't do this. It's like, why did I do this? Why did I do it? And I don't know what happened. I guess I just sick and tired of baloney.
Mm-hmm.
I try not to be a bad person. I'm not a perpetual killer. I've screwed up my whole family.
Your 22-year-old, what did Rachel say about all this?
She really hasn't said that much.
What's her involvement?
She doesn't know a thing.
So Rachel has zero knowledge whatsoever. When we talk to her, is that what she's going to tell us?
Mm-hmm.
She has no idea.
She has no clue.
Were you ever worried that you'd get caught?
I didn't even think that far.
When did you start thinking about that?
Probably today when you showed up.
All right, Diane. If you can stand up for us, we have to put some handcuffs on you.
Formalities.
Yeah, it is.
I did not arrest her for homicide at that point because we still have no physical evidence, and there was more information I wanted to obtain from Diane going forward. It was noted to me that out in the garage on a workbench that there was a bottle of antifreeze that was right next to a 6-pack of Coke. It's just set up right out in the garage, almost as if it's getting prepared for the next go-round. Then one of our crime scene investigators told me that I probably should respond to our evidence room. So I immediately went there, and he showed me a diary that had been located in Diane's bedroom, but it appeared to be that of Rachel's. It was just another twist in the case that you thought there's no way there can be more.
She did it with antifreeze, adding the chemical to Mark and Sean's drinks, virtually undetectable in taste, making them sick until their organs failed.
I got a call saying Diane has just been arrested. After I hung up, I was furious. Knowing all of the steps she had to take to pull these murders off really made me consider what sort of devious mind she had to have had to make that happen.
Can I get you to switch with me?
Okay.
I'll sit there. Thank you.
Diane was adamant that Rachel had nothing to do with it, even made a statement to me that Rachel would not hurt a fly, but I had to find out from Rachel exactly what her involvement and knowledge in the case was.
Once you found out yesterday about what your mom did, what do you think about that?
Confusion, shock. I mean, that's... Nobody expects to have somebody that they know do that. A bit scared of who would be next. I mean, who judges who can live?
Were you ever suspicious of your mom?
No.
No. So she never told you specifically that she wanted to hurt your dad, your brother, or your sister?
No.
No. Rachel, do you recognize this?
Yeah, I remember this.
What is that?
Little journal thing.
A journal thing? Whose journal?
Mine.
Inside the diary, there was an entry that was written long before the passing of both Mark and Sean, where Rachel indicated that she knew that both her father and brother were going to be passing away.
It says, "It's sad when I realize how my father will pass on in the next 2 months." What does that mean?
And when she looked at that, she turned white. It was almost as if she had seen a ghost.
Rachel, whose idea was this?
Mom brought it up, I mean, and we discussed, but I remember her searching online, talking about different drinks that it could mix with, and you couldn't detect taste.
And by poisoning them, the intent was to kill them. Is that correct? When she was doctoring the drinks, she would pour some of the drink out, and then she would put the antifreeze in the drink and then give it to your father?
Mm-hmm.
How often did you do that?
3-4 times. It was a trade-off. She would do it, and then I would.
Why did you guys want to kill them?
Dad was basically a drain on her, on us. He had no concept of money. Sean, I accepted that she wanted him gone, but I really didn't think he was necessary.
What about Sarah?
More or less, she wasn't going anywhere with her life, and that... Can't remember any other specific things, but just a general frustration and something needs to be done.
She was just very matter of fact, and the look on Rachel's face, it was extremely sinister, just void of emotion, and it was very eerie. After Rachel was arrested, my partner searched Rachel's purse, and inside the purse was another journal. And inside it, I found a poem that stated that once upon a time there were 6, now there are 3, only the quiet ones are left. During the court proceedings, there was a deal that was struck with Rachel that she would testify against her mother. The deal was essentially to give Rachel the possibility for parole after approximately 40 or so years in prison. Diane also ended up taking a plea deal. Diane's agreed sentence was that the death penalty would be taken off the table and that she would serve life in prison without the possibility of parole.
Your mom and Rachel have both admitted to killing your dad and brother. What do you think about that?
I'm shocked.
And how do you feel that your mom and sister have both admitted to trying to kill you?
I want to forgive them for doing that.
Sarah went through indescribable pain and trauma from this, and based upon all that, she's confined to an assisted living style facility.
For someone like Sean that really did not have a lot of connections in the outside world, his family was what he had. They were the nucleus around him. Sean was a good kid. He was an intelligent young man, and he did not deserve to die.
I still connect with Mark through music.
How well I remember.
I always enjoy listening to Mark's songs. I sing along with them and wish that I'd had an opportunity while he was alive to do something with those. Mark was a good man, a good musician, taken away far too young. If there was one last thing I would say to Mark, it's just, I miss you, bro.